Siddharth. I'm the co-founder and CEO at ClearMeat, which is India's first and only ISO certified lab-grown meat company. Keeping time short and discussing more into the factors from the cultivated meat industry, my fellow speakers have touched base upon fermentation, plant-based proteins, but I would be more focusing about our experiences when it comes to cultivated meat and how the global audience is reacting to it, and what is the feedback that we have achieved, keeping in mind the current topic of batch validation and consistency measures. Now, before we move ahead, we have to understand what is lab cultivated meat. In a very basic or a layman language, it is still meat, it is a mass of cells made directly from animals, but without the use of farming animals. So, on these lines, you have to figure out that these two are different product lines, different production lines, but the input and the output material is same. On these texts, if you look at the naming or nomenclature that has been discussed lately or in the last couple of years, people identify this as lab-grown meat, as cultivated, as cultured, as in silico, as artificial meat. But we have to understand the science or the basics behind it. It is at the end of the day a mass of cells. You take it a normal traditional meat or you take meat made in lab. It is ultimately the mass of cells. And this is one of the first feedbacks that we received after numerous interactions with the audience in the globe and also in India, that it should be labeled as meat at the end of the day. It is the role of the regulatory bodies and the policy makers to differentiate these two products when it comes to the ingredients, when it comes to the process and the quality checks that we discuss of. Moving ahead, when you speak of cultivated meat, there are four major pillars that we have identified in our experience journey. Now, these four pillars include the cell lines, the cell banks, the second one being the cell growth media, which is normally fetal bovine serum, and I'm aware most of you guys might be understanding the impact of fetal bovine serum. The third one is the method, and fourth one is the licensing and policy framework that we speak of. Quickly moving ahead, if you look at the quality checkpoints, the three pillars out of these 4 points play a very pivotal role in how this industry will flourish and how this industry will grow in the coming years. One being the cell lines, that is the source of the cell lines, the traceability associated, and my fellow speakers have identified it from the lines of GLP, GLP, identifying halal, kosher, and all those factors. The traceability on the cell line part, the traceability when it comes to identifying alternative or sustainable ways of growing cells in lab, replacement of fetal bovine serum, and this is something that DBT has been doing very vigorously. I remember there is a 2014 dossier of DBT that specifically specifies that all the research labs in India should identify alternatives to fetal bovine serum in their routine research. So this becomes another factor that needs more quality checks as and when we grow. From the method point, most of these speakers are already discussing on those lines, and I will not take your time on those factors. But it is surprising to see that today we are here discussing risk factors, and we have curated certain quality check parameters that are associated with cultivated meat industry or meat industry. And again, these have been taken surprisingly from the textbooks of FSSAI, from the textbooks of NABL, from the textbooks of CIDISCO. So the first and foremost aspect that I have realized in my journey of cultivated meat industry is that we need more crosstalk within the industry, within the departments, so that they can give out their feedbacks on what they are doing. As rightly identified, there are certain parameters like appearance, pH, toxicity, osmolarity, microbial contaminations, which have been specifically, however they are in a different domain area, but specifically curated on how the quality checks should work and how this industry should flourish. So we need a common booth, as already discussed in the last session also, a common framework that pools all these factors and bring in. But when it comes to specifically to lab-grown or cultivated meat, the batch validation has to be done keeping in mind the Asia's perspective from GMO, non-GMO, from understanding the impact of these cells on genomic stability. What happens if these cells go into the food chain? That can be achieved, broadly speaking, by using techniques like NGS and LCMS. These techniques are already being used by countries outside India for their routine validations of imports and exports. Why can't India do that? And the second parameter, which I think is not getting showcased here, is more into the raw materials that are utilized. These raw materials need better traceability. Now, it is when we look at the policy making format of FSSAI, we have learned in our whole journey that innovation leads to disruption and disruption leads to discussion. And India is doing a lot of discussion on those lines, and I'm being pretty, from a global perspective, we are far ahead when it comes to identifying the pain points of this industry. I've worked with Singaporean policies, I have worked with US policy. We have realized what mistakes they have done, and from my perspective, my experience, India is doing the right channels and putting the right discussions on shelf. Because let me take an example of Singapore. For them, the main criteria of pushing this industry was food security or the loss of food items. There was a huge demand supply crisis back then before COVID. They had to figure out ways to bring out alternative proteins on shelf. For US, they are already fighting a battle within the policymakers and within the lobbyists. But India is specifically playing a pivotal role when it comes to identifying a balance between all these factors. A balance from waste management to how the traceability from product management and product labeling ends. And I feel confident that whatever discussions are going in the right direction. But to begin with, there is one more factor that is left in this whole story. That is the impact that we create. Yes, we are working on the formats of risk assessment, we are working on the formats of labeling it, but we have to parallelly understand how the globe is taking in for granted the alternative protein industry, how the globe is actually understanding the alternative protein industry. The reason alternative protein industry was initiated was basically to answer the sustainability and climate change parameters. And I think, which is also a part of India's G20 summary, that India should push for more sustainable ways of making food products or any product that we speak of. Taking an example from our own experiences, what we make in lab is actually meat which is obtained from non-fecal Weinstein methods. It has actually helped us save 150 cows till date and impacted 60 million tons of greenhouse emissions. So the idea here is that the policy makers, apart from risk assessment, apart from labeling, should also focus on green labeling or green credits that can be utilized to make the whole thought process more acceptable to the masses. And with this, I take the time and thank you for listening to me patiently, and I hope I completed in time. Thank you.
Thank you.